We live in an era of cancel culture, lived in it for years at this point. People are ravenous for any possible reason to bring down media figureheads, simultaneously eager to consume the content this cruel justice produces, while seemingly throwing the actual issue at hand to the wayside. So when spectacle and ridicule becomes the commodity, resistance in turn builds to the idea of redemption. And that's not an unfair resistance to build up per se. Humans are complex creatures, and words won't change a heart in a day, maybe even in a month or a year. Actions may speak louder than words, but even the most kind-hearted acts of good faith are ultimately drowned out by the insurmountable reality of who you used to be. So, when you're not the crowd but the condemned, when you do unspeakable things to someone else, how do you move forward? This is the story of Shoya Ishida. This is A Silent Voice.
君はね、確かにあの時私のそばにいた。いつだっていつだっていつだってすぐ横で笑っていた。なくしても取り戻す君を I will never leave you.
Koe no Katachi, or A Silent Voice, is an anime movie from Kyoto Animation, based on the manga of the same name by Yoshitoki Oima, and was released on October 17th, 2016. And from that release date alone, you would think that this anime was screwed. If you're not quite sure what I'm alluding to, try to rack your brain for another coming-of-age anime movie following a high schooler boy-girl duo that came out in 2016. That's right, I'm talking about Kizumonogatari, baby!
It's gonna make $1 Kizumon-gillion!
Oh yeah, and also your name, I guess. It might seem like a curse to have your surface-level similar movie released just a month after the third highest grossing anime movie ever storms onto stage. But as time has gone on, the conversation around these two movies has shifted, despite your name's immense popularity overshadowing A Silent Voice at the time. It's A Silent Voice that remains much more critically acclaimed and highly praised to this day. Compare that to the reputation of Your Name, which has, if anything, soured in recent years. The fact that A Silent Voice was able to steadily rise in popularity and gain this many accolades in the face of what is probably the most formidable opponent ever is a testament to the raw quality on display here. And if you take a look at the staff working on the movie, you'll understand right away how this feat was accomplished. You see, not only was A Silent Voice animated by the legendary Kyoto Animation, it was directed by Naoko Yamada, who is by far one of the most influential animators of the late 2000s. Clannad, Haruhi, Lucky Star, Yamada has had a hand in several of the hits that defined what anime was in that time. But it wasn't until 2009 that she completely changed the anime landscape forever with a little show called K-On! The impact Yamada had on anime through K-On! Isn't something I can fully discuss in this video, so just keep in mind it revolutionized how anime characters and anime as a whole is presented. Now, K-On!'s not the progenitor of waifus or moe culture, but what it did was remove any semblance of plot and hone in on showcasing the personalities and relationships of a group of cute anime girls. It didn't need drama or big emotional moments to make you fall in love with these characters, because their personalities were so well established through even the most mundane of interactions. And with the rampant success of K-On! In every circle imaginable, and I mean every circle imaginable, it's not surprising that the ramifications of Yamada's work are still present today through character designs, show structure, and general otaku culture. But forget about K-On! For a second, let's talk about Yamada herself. Yamada talks about in interviews how she struggles to communicate with others, opting to try and express herself through facial expressions or gestures rather than words. And I mean, yeah, just look at her in interviews. Just look at those hands! You can see how Yamada channels that kind of nervous, indirect communication into her work, like with her staple technique of conveying emotion through legs. A Tarantino-esque maneuver if I do say so myself. And yes, I mean it that way. So we have a director who has immense talent in showcasing character traits in the tiniest of moments, and brings a level of her own communication struggles into her character animation. Yup. It's kind of insane how perfectly she matches what A Silent Voice needed out of a director. But before we get into that and actually dig into the plot of the movie, let's be a bit monkey brain here. We don't need to be pretentious and pretend like we care about how the history and the team enhances the movie, because when I look at a silent voice, my brain goes, "Ooh, animation pretty." If there's two things that Kyoto Animation is known for, it's good working conditions and being able to output the most beautiful animation you'll ever see in your life. Where something like a Studio Ghibli film is well animated in the elastic movements of their characters, or Ufotable anime are well animated in having jaw-dropping action choreography, KyoAni's area of expertise is making real life look better than real life. It's something about the way sunlight inhabits and plays off the characters. The intermittent flora of urban Japan giving a vibrance to every scene. It's this friggin' french fry, I don't know. Give a man a fish and he'll eat for a day, teach a man to post anime food to Twitter, and he'll make enough money off monetization to buy himself a Big Mac meal that honestly looks inadequate in comparison. The character animation in this movie obviously holds a lot of weight as well. Just look at this animated sign language. Look at that Yamada touch I'm talking about. Here's a scene with nothing but knees, and I can somehow still exactly tell what emotions this character is expressing. But the characters themselves almost at times feel secondary to the near photorealistic world that surrounds them. The animation in this movie isn't cool. It's not just well animated. There's no other way to describe it than beautiful. And I think that's also the only word you can use to describe Shoya and the journey he takes on in a silent voice. Shoya Ishida is an easygoing elementary schooler, looking for any way to cut loose and have fun with his friends. However, his life is suddenly changed when Shoko Nishimiya, a girl with hearing disabilities, transfers to his class, and he decides that it is his duty to bully Shoko in any way possible. Shoya chooses to pick on her, not out of any kind of malice, but to stave off the boredom of growing up that threatens to end his childhood fun. And so Shoya's quest begins, yelling in ears, writing insults on the chalkboard, and generally making Shoko's life miserable with no remorse. Ever wanted to punch a kid? Now you do. It's easy to brush off the impact of bullying, especially if you've never experienced it yourself. You can say, they're just kids, or it's all in good fun. But to sit down and put yourself in the shoes of Shoya, take those hearing aids, throw those notebooks in the pool without getting any pushback from fellow kids or adults alike, that is different. At points, Shoya's actions might seem overly cruel for an elementary schooler, but it's exactly his innocence and ignorance of the real impact of his actions that allows him to do these things to Shoko. And with that, you create a balance. These kids aren't evil, demented psychopaths. They're children treating Shoko like she's a new toy they found off the road because their uncaring teacher never told them otherwise. And this balance is what allows us to be sympathetic to Shoya despite his earlier actions. When Shoya takes all the blame for Shoko's bullying, and he is subsequently bullied by his former friends. And look, I don't care that this is the exact same thing he was doing to Shoko. I don't care that he's getting what he deserves or whatever. He's still just a kid being used as a scapegoat for the failures of an entire class. He's still just a 12-year-old getting death threats, bro. You aren't supposed to get those at that age unless you opt into them by joining Valorant lobbies.
Literally, kill yourself.
The cherry on top of this flashback is the scene where Shoya comes to class early to see Shoko doing something to his desk, and he gets into a fight with her. There's something uniquely painful about Shoya thinking he can and should still try to fit in with his former friends, as he treats Shoko with the exact same disdain as before despite their similar circumstances. But there's also a strange sense of joy in seeing Shoko finally fight back. It's a girl made up of thank yous and I'm sorries, putting her full emotion on display for once, free of social pretext as all the things she couldn't say before come spilling out of her. And it's in this moment that Shoya and Shoko's childhoods coalesce. They come out of this fight more broken and alone than ever, but for a split second. This is the first real connection the two of them have ever made in their entire lives. Days go by, and Shoya realizes that Shoko was cleaning his desk of hateful graffiti left by his classmates every morning. There's many things that Shoya could say to this, but it's already too late for words, as Shoko has already transferred to a different school. Shoya is now truly alone. It's this so-called karma that forces Shoya to retreat into his shell, holding contempt for anyone he sees and entering a solitude that lasts to the final years of high school. Shoya now lives an empty life. No connections, no passions, drifting through life with no purpose. That is, until he sees Shoko again. All it takes is one encounter with Shoko, and he blurts out the words before he can even think. This will be the second time that Shoya's life is changed by meeting Shoko. If he can't live his life for himself, Shoya thinks, perhaps he can give it back to the one person whose life he ruined. And with that, Shoya begins his long journey down the road of forgiveness and redemption. The way Shoya and Shoko's relationship develops and blossoms has gotta be in my at least top 10 things in life. And it all starts with Shoya struggling to even meet with Shoko. At first, it's both heartwarming and heartbreaking to see Shoya take the concerns of those closest to Shoko so seriously. You're equally assured and concerned with Shoya's changing character from his elementary schooler days. How easily dissuaded he is to make contact with Shoko because of the weight of his sin crawling on his back. That is, until a friend who sees the best in him gives him that right to move on. And then another friend does the same. And another, and soon Shoya is breaking down barriers, and man, it's so beautiful. It's like seeing your ultra-introverted friend finally talk normally to a cashier. Shoya doesn't satisfy these people or even his own self-doubts in a day. It's through a constant dialogue between his growth and the people he befriends that barriers are broken down, and both Shoya and the audience are slowly able to let go of the past. It's funny. We know we're not the static images that others like to project onto us, but it's not until someone sees our humanity that we're able to have confidence in our own dynamic nature. So now Shoya's seeing Shoko regularly, but he's got another bigger problem. Where do we go from here? And this is where the magic begins. Maybe I'm a sadist, but if there's one thing I love, it's watching two socially awkward people try to communicate with each other.
No, 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 no.
Shoya's lovable, but he's still trying to understand this whole friend thing and can't quite gauge the distance between them. Thankfully for him, it looks like Shoko's just as lost as he is. Shoko seems to be taking Shoya's journey in reverse, where Shoya's uncertainty in their friendship is slowly affirmed by growing connections with the other people in Shoko's life. Shoko is denied that same gesture by the people in Shoya's life, remaining unforgiven and still really only able to say sorry with a smile. It's the blind leading the blind, as the two dance around discussing the important stuff, unable to have that necessary heart-to-heart from fear of repeating past mistakes. Shoya can use sign language now, but that accomplishment means nothing if the two aren't willing to actually frickin' talk to each other. The two still slowly connect using the same pretenses. They're together so Shoko can connect with a former classmate, or at an amusement park with a bigger friend group. They don't really talk. Just enjoy the comfort of being allowed to exist in each other's presence. Which is nice and all, but like...
他にメールしたい相手いる？そう、教えようか。俺さあ、は
Come on, bro. It's frustrating to watch for sure, but it also means that for the one moment they are truly alone, a dreamlike quality envelops the scene, saying that this is what the two have been missing the whole time. Yamada has a unique way of framing Shoya and Shoko's relationship, stating, "There's a term in math called a limit, used to describe values that are not equal but are similar as they approach infinity. I thought about using that as a foothold to approach Shoya and Shoko." And, as confusing as that statement sounds at first, I kinda feel what she's saying. Shoya is selfish. He blocks people out of his life, projecting and assuming the worst in everyone from the lasting trauma of losing his former elementary school friends. He's so desperate to leave behind his old self that he pushes others away to fend off his insecurities about the past, only leaving room for his future with Shoko. Meanwhile, Shoko is helpless, both feeling like a bystander and the crux for every single thing that goes wrong in Shoya's social life. She can passively smile as always, but this keeps her from forming real connections and relegates her to the background, as she watches friendships fall apart without the means to stop it or even understand what's going on. Shoya and Shoko stand on very different ground, opposites in their past and their social anxieties, yet beat down by the world, reduced again and again until they seem to come to the exact same deductions about their own relationship. She is the girl who cannot hear, and he is the boy who refuses to listen. The conclusions and progress they find together making this movie as emotionally powerful and beloved as it is. But that's not what I thought when I first watched A Silent Voice. The story may have been heartfelt, the animation beautiful, but as the credits rolled, I could not stop this feeling of immense disappointment from flooding my body. It's true that Shoya and Shoko's story of redemption and finding peace is thoughtfully told, but unfortunately, I can't say the same about the rest of the cast. And hey, let's set things straight. I like the cast of A Silent Voice a lot. I like Nagatsuka, I like Yuzuru, I hope Miki gets flattened by a runaway car, but she's an exception, okay? Not the rule. And then we get to characters like Naoka. Don't get me wrong, I love how Naoka works for the story. She's supposed to be extremely unlikable, really embodying Shoko's self-hatred and getting to do some heinous crap to her.
Oh! Not bad!
So, what can reconcile Naoka and Shoko's relationship by the end of the movie? How do we go from this to this? Well, Naoka learned to insult Shoko in sign language, obviously.
Seriously?
Same things happen to even more minor characters like Sahara. Hey Shoya, we're riding a roller coaster right now, which can actually act as a metaphor for my personal struggles. So I'll quickly exposit my character arc and then not be brought up that much after this scene. Okay, bye. Mashiba is here. For about 2 minutes. It's strange for a movie with so much thought and care put into developing complex main characters to have such an awkward, sudden approach to dealing with its side characters. And by the end of the movie, it feels like we've skipped a step. Shoya gets into a big fight with everyone, goes into a coma, and for some reason wakes up better friends with everyone than before.
Of course. It's genius. Why didn't I think of that?
Characters seem to reconcile not because of some deep, underlying character growth, but because the movie's ending in less than 20 minutes. From this, the ending of A Silent Voice gives me this strange feeling that it's both deeply moving and deeply cheesy. In so many ways, this movie just feels clumsy. Things don't always flow that well from scene to scene, the overall pacing's kinda messy, smaller complaints for sure. But along with the bigger critiques, it all adds up to a movie that feels awkward in its execution. Nowadays, I have a higher opinion and appreciation for this movie, but when I first saw it, I straight up did not like it. At that time, I spouted the same criticisms we just went over, but honestly, deep down, I knew the true reason I didn't like this movie was because I read the manga first. I first ran into the A Silent Voice manga when I was looking around my local library and decided to pick it up on a whim because hey, Volume 1 was there. I found a place to sit, started flipping through the first few pages to gauge if it was worth borrowing, and before I knew it, I had finished the whole volume, and it was my desk. Nishimiya was cleaning my desk. Tears were rolling down my face. This was the moment I realized I had discovered a genuinely life-changing manga. To understand how disappointed I was by a Silent Voices movie, you have to understand that I loved this manga to an insane degree. I would have never accepted anything but a perfect adaptation. But looking back now, it's obvious that that expectation was doomed from the moment KyoAni decided to adapt a Silent Voice into a movie instead of a TV series. When I first saw the movie, I was devastated at how much manga content was cut. I mean, they cut out a major subplot about Shoya and crew making a movie, they cut out several characters' backstories, they even have the audacity to cut out Nagatsuka's freaking cat allergy. Trash adaptation. But like, come on, this was always gonna be unavoidable. You can't fit 7 volumes worth of content into a movie, it's just not possible. Instead, the movie shaves most non-essential things off and concentrates on the core elements and characters in the story. This isn't a replacement for the cut content, but Yamada had a pretty good idea of what to keep and what to cut in order to keep the movie flowing, not bloated, and true to the source material. The bigger impact that this cut content has is a bit more subtle, as no matter how similar they may try to be, a 7-volume manga will feel very different from a 2-hour movie. Let's talk about mood. While the movie has small bits of comedy here and there, it's bound together by hard-hitting moments and sustains a pretty serious, somber tone through it all. Can't say the same thing about the manga. Here's 5 pages of Shoya as a jacked superhero beating up a catwoman Naoka. Here's Nagatsuka getting into a rom-com level misunderstanding that answers the age-old question of, what if a tsundere is not in fact a tsundere and just hates your guts? Of course, the manga still hits the same emotional beats that are present in the anime, but it's a lot more well-rounded than the adaptation might have you believe. While anime Shoya slowly walks his way along the road of redemption, manga Shoya strolls along, able to thoroughly appreciate the friends he's made before that good old loneliness and depression hits. Shoya gets to hang out with Nagatsuka, learn his positives and negatives, even get into dumb fights with him, and through this extended process learn what being a friend is all about. You still get the broad strokes of this in the movie, but it's fast-tracked. The movie has to be pretty choosy about what it includes and for how long, therefore creating that different feeling. It's not a bad different feeling, but I do think the more varied pace the manga is able to take benefits the kind of story it wants to tell. And if we really want to keep talking about mood setters, we need to talk about the art style. If I were to compare Yoshitoki Oima's character art to that of another mangaka, it'd be to Tatsuki Fujimoto of Chainsaw Man fame. Fujimoto is praised for the way he draws these unfiltered, wild expressions, not at the apex of when a character looks cool, but the frame directly before it. You can see that kind of philosophy in Oima's work too, but where Fujimoto uses this technique to play into the rawness of the worlds he draws, Oima's characters exist as a carousel of varied expressions to show the ambiguity of emotions. Look at Shoko's face, going out with Shoya right after he has a big fight with his friends. She isn't quite drawn as happy or sad, more like that kind of face your friend would send you on Discord after experiencing the most traumatic event of their life. Or how about this series of panels where Shoko confesses her love for Shoya? Shoko shows anticipation, disbelief, sheepishness, bewilderment, cringing resignation, and relief, all to convey the main emotion of embarrassment. For a story about a group of people who are really bad at communicating their feelings, it's fitting for Oima to use several panels to represent the wide range of expressions that a single emotion can contain. This stands in stark contrast to the movie adaptation's focus on environmental shots, full-body movements, and framing characters on opposite sides of the screen to tell you how frustratingly not on the same page they are. You can say that both of these pieces of media have a documentary-like feel to them. It's just that the anime is planet Earth with the camera pulled all the way back here, while the manga is the directly personal stories we tell, with the camera all up in their face. To encapsulate the differences between the manga and the anime into one key aspect, notice how, in contrast to the anime's many long shots, the biggest panels in the manga are close-ups in the top half of the page. Try counting the number of 2-page spreads and 1-pagers in a silent voice. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. 11 2-page spreads and 2 1-pagers in the whole 7-volume manga. And I'm not gonna lie, those aren't even the most impactful pages. Cause when I say impactful pages, I'm talking about Shoko smiling as she's fighting, Shoya's first peek at acceptance, and even the new competitor in the Silent Voice Slap series.
Oh god! Whoa!
Big, sweeping emotions leak out of these relatively smaller panels, as no heavy, emotionally charged panel in the manga happens in isolation, rather as a release for the buildup of an entire scene. It's Oima saying these moments weren't meant to be viewed alone, just as Shoya's journey happens as that constant dialogue and shifting of beliefs that he learns from the others he meets along the way. Speaking of, let's talk about characters. A big part of why I was so disappointed in the movie's handling of A Silent Voice's characters is because the side characters are what make the manga so special. In the movie, the past lives of many of these characters are left to interpretation. But in the manga? Did you ever want to learn about Shoko's mom's messy divorce that led to her overprotection and rejection of Shoko's deafness? Did you ever want to see Sahara's constant attempts to forgive the past and improve herself spurned on by the various figures in her life? Did you ever want to learn about how Mashiba, a victim of bullying in elementary school, is unable to forgive his former bullies, growing a weird obsession with pursuing his own personal form of revenge and gravitating to Shoya in order to find a sense of normalcy, only to learn that he needs to let go of the past for a chance to heal in the same way Shoya has? No? His eyebrows are a large part of his character. These flashbacks act as simple snapshots, showing heartbreak at pivotal life moments and letting you connect the dots of how that moment forced these characters to develop into who they are today. It's not that these flashbacks are integral to tell their story, but that they fill out and affirm a level of nuance in these characters that's only implied without it. So with this nuance, the side characters match Shoya's level, and Oima is able to use them to flesh out his journey to redemption that much more. Everyone in the manga is a reflection of another, meaningfully adding to the question of what it is to forgive someone. Shoya and Shoko reflect each other, Naoko reflects Shoya's former resistance to change and Shoko's self-hatred, Mashiba reflects both Shoya and Shoko's refusal to let go of the past, Miki is there. All of these characters play off of each other and challenge Shoya and Shoko's relationship in different ways. They ask and answer exactly the right questions, acting both as an outsider's perspective and an instrumental piece in untangling their past. And they're able to do this because we learn just as much about them as we do Shoya and Shoko. You can feel the amount of care Oima puts into each of her characters, as we bond with them and really try to understand and contextualize them next to Shoya and Shoko. Wait, who's that? So here we are at the Naoka section. I could have come up with a better segue, but I really just want to talk about Naoka because I just freaking love her, man. I love her so much that in the process of writing this script, I unearthed a whole English presentation I made about her, and also about how terrible Miki is. Wow, maybe I'm the generational hater. She's a character that gets so much hate in the fandom, and like, it's not undeserved, but I gotta step up and defend her name just a bit here. The reason I love Naoka, in spite of the awful things she does, really just comes down to this one scene. It's the part where Naoka sees Shoko again for the first time in years, and steals Shoko's hearing aid, trying to bring back a time when her and Shoya had a connection, to which Shoya quickly puts a stop to. In the anime, Naoka calls Shoya and Shoko's friendship fake, the camera carefully hiding her expression, to suggest a sense of sadness in contrast to the carefree way she carries herself. But in the manga, there she is, facing the reader head-on, yet seemingly so separated from Shoya, who carries on conversing with Shoko as if she isn't there. Where Shoko reunites with Shoya and sees a bridge built between them, Naoka comes back only to see a dark chasm. Naoka is isolated from a person she once held dear that has now transformed into a stranger, as she lazily masks the tears rolling down her face with emotionless laughter. I can't tell you how Oima conveys such profound sadness and isolation in a paltry 2 panels, but I can tell you that these panels changed the trajectory for my thought process about Naoka from this point forward. There's a tragedy about Naoka, despite her efforts, not being able to understand or even want to understand Shoko, that's not present in the movie. I think it's a tragedy that Naoka herself acknowledges. But that's not just who Naoka is either. In the manga, it's Naoka who pushes Shoya to reconcile with his friends. It's Naoka who forces Shoko to recognize the limits of her fake smiles. And while she's misguided in the way she goes about it, the manga shows over and over that she genuinely cares about Shoya and the rest of her friends, walking alongside them, acknowledging her faults, reconciling the past, and eventually finding her own way forward. And you know, through Naoka, I can see the message of a silent voice come alive. Through her, we're challenged to really question our own forgiveness, to appreciate the unlikable character and allow her to transform and bloom in her own way. This is why the characters make this manga so special, and I hope from this short analysis, you're able to understand why I cared so much about losing large chunks of this kind of nuance when adapting A Silent Voice to film. A lot still lost in that translation from manga to movie, leading to rollercoaster exposition and 5 kilometers of conflict resolution per second. Instead, you get a more focused look at Shoya and Shoko's relationship as a trade-off. And honestly, that's something the movie has up over the manga. With how many characters take up page time, Shoko can oddly feel distant from Shoya in the manga. Whereas in the movie version, the compressing of other characters lets Shoya and Shoko be in constant proximity, scene after scene, adding to and elaborating on their relationship. Shoko is probably the only character in A Silent Voice who doesn't feel streamlined because she gets that extra time to breathe in the movie. And I mean, obviously, she has to be. She's not just adding to the question of forgiveness, she is the question. Without her, you lose the core of what A Silent Voice is. So to still be able to beautifully tell the story of Shoya and Shoko as they walk together seeking forgiveness is to keep the core of what the manga wants to convey. I can be conceited like I was when I first watched this movie, but what I can't do is say that the movie version of A Silent Voice is a bad adaptation. No matter what they cut out, what changes there are to the mood or characters, the movie is able to capture and even elevate the central relationship of Shoya and Shoko. The music, the animation, the voice acting all come together into a work of genuine art that brings A Silent Voice to life. When I think back to A Silent Voice, I remember the manga's extended series of sufferings that elementary schooler Shoya undertakes, but I visualize the anime's version of Shoya and Shoko fighting in my head. I am amazed reading the manga's final chapters and seeing Shoya finally learn to listen to those around him. But the shot of Shoya lifting his hands from his ears as the music swells in the anime accentuates that impact so much more. And so, I think I finally have to admit that the anime captures that exact same beauty that the manga pursues. The movie understands what A Silent Voice is, and is able to express that in spite of its missing parts. And that's just something I have to respect. If A Silent Voice's movie is still able to drum up those life-changing feelings that I felt when reading the manga, then that makes it a good adaptation. And that's something the manga can never take away from it. A Silent Voice will always and forever be an important piece of media to me. And as much as I still think it would feel great to be a hater, I can't pretend like the anime isn't a part of that importance for me now as well. Hand in hand, the manga and anime work together, creating a clearer image of who Shoya and Shoko are, what forgiveness means, and how to move forward in life. If A Silent Voice is a series about how we are not static beings, that our capacity for change can shine brighter than the cynical past that shadows our every movement, then I owe it to myself to keep evolving and never stop. Both the manga and the movie are able to tell the same story about learning to connect with others. And part of that process is sacrificing our pessimism to find and accept joy found in those connections. So, as we go out and force ourselves to find more worth in the world, we gain until we reach near infinity and nothing separates us from our own self-worth. Like Shoya and Shoko standing out there on the bridge, we have achieved the limit. We spread our hands wide, reach out far into the distance, and we listen.